In this section, we're going to go ahead and list the domain and range and draw the graph of common functions that appear fairly often. So we'll go ahead and do this for 6 different functions, and there's more functions that you can look at in the book, but these are going to be the main ones. Our first function is called a constant function, and this is when every y value is the same y value. The domain of this function is going to be all real numbers, so I, and the range of this function is only going to be one number, so it's only going to be c. And we can write this using interval notation as follows. The graph of this function looks something like this. All right, the second one that we'll be looking at is called the identity function. This is given by y is equal to x. The domain of this function is again all real numbers, and the range in this case is also given by all real numbers. The graph of this function is just the graph of the standard line. The third function that we'll be looking at is the absolute value function. Which is given by y absolute value of x. And the domain of this function is going to be, again, all real numbers, but the range in this case is going to be only the non-negative real numbers from 0 to infinity. All right, the fourth one, we'll be looking at the reciprocal function. Which is given by y is equal to 1 over x. The domain of this function is going to be all real numbers except for 0, which is negative infinity to 0, union 0 to infinity, which is going to have a range of all real numbers again except for 0. And the graph of such a function looks something like the following. All right, 2 more functions. So for the fifth one, we'll be looking at the reciprocal squared function. And this is given by y is equal to 1 divided by x squared. The domain of this function is, again, all real numbers except for 0. And the range of this function is going to be 0 to infinity. All right, and the final one is we'll just go ahead and review the square root function. And this is going to be given by y is the square root of x, and the domain of this is going to be all non-negative numbers, so 0 to infinity, and the range is again going to be all non-negative numbers, so 0 to infinity. So let's go ahead and look at one more example in this section. So this is going to be example 6. And again, we want to go ahead and find the domain and range of the given function y is going to be equal to the square root of x minus 3 divided by x minus 3. And we're going to do this algebraically. So this function is going to have 2 restrictions to its domain. First, the denominator can't be equal to 0. And second, in the numerator, all the numbers inside the square root have to be greater than or equal to 3. So let's go ahead and write this down. So when x minus 3 is equal to 0, our function's undefined, so x minus 3 can't be equal to 0. And what this tells us is that our function is going to be undefined at x is equal to 3. And again, the other restriction that we had is that, so let me write this, this is denominator restriction, and this is the numerator. So in the numerator, we have to have that x minus 3 is greater than or equal to 0. Otherwise, our function is undefined. And so this is only going to occur when x is greater than or equal to 3. So let's just go ahead and draw, again, the number line just to see what's going on real fast. So our function is going to be defined everywhere by our numerator except at 3. And then also, our function is going to be defined only when x is greater than or equal to 3. So given these two restrictions, the only place that these two conditions do occur is when we have that our x values are going to be strictly greater than 3. Which means the domain of this function is going to be given from 3 to infinity. So let's go ahead and find the range of the function. And the first thing that we can notice is that both the denominator and numerator are only going to produce positive numbers given what we just found for the domain. So our question, what we can already assume is that the range is going to only have non-negative numbers. And the question that we have to ask is, does the range contain 0? So we can just go ahead and check if our range is going to contain 0 by setting it equal to 0. So suppose, again, we have a y value which is equal to 0. We want to go ahead and find the x value. So this is going to be given by x minus 3 divided by x minus 3. So multiplying x minus 3 on both sides, we're left with 0 is equal to the square root of x minus 3. We can go ahead and solve for x here. So x is going to occur, we can just square both sides real fast. So there's going to be 0 is equal to x minus 3. And that means x has to be equal to 3. And what this is saying is that the only time our y value is going to be 0 occurs when x is equal to 3. But this can occur, and the reason why is because x is equal to 3 is not in the domain. Which means the range of our function is going to be all positive numbers, not including 0.